Welcome to the 2024 Year Ahead Horoscope for Scorpio Sun and Rising. Now, I am making this specifically for Scorpio Rising. However, of course, you can watch it for your sun sign and any other placement that you have. So, pretty interesting year for the Scorpio Risings. Quite a bit to talk about. So, let's just go over the major transits of 2024 first. So, I already did a general overview of the year. Make sure you watch that video if you want to listen to me talk about the general synopsis on the mundane level of all of these major transits. But we're starting the year off with Pluto ingressing into Aquarius on the 20th. This is a big deal because Pluto will spend quite a bit of this year in Aquarius. It will go back into Capricorn from September and October. And then on November 19th, Pluto will move into Aquarius where it will stay for the next 2 decades. So this is kind of the last hurrah of Pluto in Capricorn. Then on April 20th, we have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. This is the most exciting transit this year, especially for you Scorpio risings. It's all relationship stuff. That's going to be fun. Then Jupiter goes into Gemini on May 25th. That will be a little bit weird for you guys. We'll have to kind of discuss more of the specifics for it because Jupiter moves into a new sign every single year. And while this will bring good stuff in one area, it comes with caveats, which I'll explain. Then by the time we get into June, we have a ton of Gemini stuff going on, which is a lot of stuff going on in your 8th house. So that might bring some uncomfortability, but it might bring some good things too, which we'll talk about. And then we have the big meta transit this year, which is going to be the Jupiter-Saturn square. So this is the caveat I was talking about, like with Jupiter and Gemini. It's like, yeah, Jupiter goes into Gemini, but it's squaring Saturn and Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter. So there's kind of this long-term, bigger picture transit that we have. We have 2 of them this year. One is on August 19th and the other one is on December 24th. We do get a third one in 2025, but they will be in different signs. But these 2 will be quite a big deal in the long run. And then by the end of the year, we get the Mars retrograde in Leo and Cancer. That starts on December 6th. And Mars only retrogrades in Leo in 2024. It will go back into Cancer in 2025, but it enters shadow in Cancer. And this is the worst transit, in my opinion, this year. This is the most difficult one. But the way to understand this is that 2024 is a buildup into 2025. That's how I want you to look at this year, because 2025 is when all of the major changes happen. But before we go into month by month, make sure you like this video. It really helps it out my channel as well. Comment below. I really want to know what month you are looking forward to, what month you are not looking forward to as well. If you want to keep up to date with all of the transits and how they're going to be affecting your birth chart specifically, go over to my website and download the transit calendar. If you look over here on my iCalendar, these little orange marks, these represent when transits in the sky are hitting personal birth chart placements. Like this says Mercury is going to go opposite my Mars. And I can click on it and it's going to tell me the interpretation of what that means. It's only $20 and you don't have to open up an app and go through all of that. It's right there on your calendar. It's super awesome. I like it a lot more than I was anticipating. So go ahead and get that if you want to be up to date this year of what's going to be happening as well. If you really want to get in detail of what this year and maybe 25 and 26 is going to look like for you, feel free to book a consultation with me in the link at the description below. So let's go ahead and start talking about it. January. So we're starting January off / ending 2023. On New Year's Eve, Jupiter stations direct. And on January 1st, Mercury stations direct. So what I like about this is everything is moving forward by the beginning of the year. Every planet is direct at this point. So there is this kind of good feeling of New Year's resolutions, everything's moving forward. And Mercury is going to station direct in your 2nd house of money and possessions. There was a Mercury stationed retrograde in Capricorn in December of 23. So there was some delays, some, miscommunication, some replanning when it comes to short distance travel, siblings, neighbors. And a lot of that had to do with money. And so then the money stuff kind of gets figured out by the beginning of the year. And we'll talk more about that as we go on. But then on January 4th, we get to our next big transit. Now, I'm going to pull up the chart for all of this stuff here in just a minute, but something that might help you in understanding how these transits are going to be is knowing if you are a day chart or a night chart. So why this is important is depending on if you're born in the day or born at night, certain planets are better and certain planets are worse. And so if you're born in the day, which means the sun is above the horizon, so if you look at the ascendant and the descendant, if the sun is above it, you're a day chart. If the sun's below it, you're a night chart. If we're talking about the 2 malefic planets, so the 2 quote unquote bad planets, this is Mars and Saturn. If you were born in the day, Mars is your malefic planet, which means Mars is a little bit more challenging for you and Saturn is a little bit better. But if you're born at night, Saturn is a little bit more challenging and Mars is a little bit better. So keep that in mind as we go along. But Mars is going to ingress into Capricorn on the 4th. I like this because, I mean, for one, Mars rules fights and conflicts and inflammation, separation, cutting, but it also just rules energy and drive and ambition. And Mars will be exalted in Capricorn, where it can just, it's like a workhorse. It can just get a lot of things done. But it's entering your 3rd house, which rules over siblings, neighbors, short distance travel, how you apply the knowledge that you have, as well as communication. So there seems to be a lot of energy going on in your local area, maybe hanging out with siblings, maybe some fights and conflicts with siblings, a lot of short distance travel. That's kind of the main thing with Mars and Capricorn. But then we get to the 20th, and this is when Pluto ingresses into Aquarius. Now, we've already had Pluto ingress into Aquarius once. That was on March of 2023 to about May and June of 2023. And I want you to think about what was going on for you around that time related to home, family, living situation, and parents. Now, Pluto dipped into Aquarius last year, and then it was in Capricorn for the majority of the time. Pluto will dip back into here. And, you know, Pluto is about power, transformation, corruption, fear. And in this video, I'm not going to be able to like give you exactly what Pluto in your 4th house is going to look like, because Pluto is going to go through your 4th house for 20 years. So we got a long time of this transit to like manifest itself. But think about that March through June time and what vibe kind of shifted with your living situation and home and family. Did you feel more empowered? Did you feel more scared? Was there a lot of corruption going on? Were you more distant? Because that energy is returning here on the 20th. And that actually brings us to February. Because in February, it's all 4th house stuff for you. And the first thing is on February 13th, Mars is going to ingress into Aquarius and conjoin Pluto. Again, in your 4th house of home and family, living situation, and parents. So the big thing with this is the best way I've been able to explain what this is all about. Here, let me actually get the correct chart pulled up. Is like Pluto or Mars conjoining Pluto reminds me of like a revolt, like an extreme power surge of energy. Let's get to Scorpio rising. There we go. And like Mars conjoining Aquarius, Mars conjoining Pluto and Aquarius. Aquarius is like society, people, networks, governments, rules, authorities, and Pluto going into, you know, your 4th house is like really changing the dynamic of power and fear related to your living situation. But Mars rules fights and conflicts and separation. And so Mars conjoining Pluto just reminds me of like a revolt, a rebellion, a revolution. And Mars conjoining Pluto is like again, Mars is fights and conflicts and problems, and it's going into your 4th house of home and family, but it's conjoining Pluto. So it's like a very transformative problem. And I know that word gets thrown a lot around in astrology. And, you know, all I can do in this video is give you guys the groundwork, what it looks like on the outside. And it's up to you to put the context together for your own life. But Mars conjoining Pluto is definitely some sort of major power shift happening related to your 4th house of home and family. Now, Mars rules your ascendant. So you are ruled by Mars. So there's a big part of you that is focused on home and family, but it also rules your 6th house of work, labor, routines, health, habits, and pets, as well as like coworkers and employees. So there's a lot of focus on you being more at home, work and health stuff being related to home and parents, and some kind of like, you know, just power shift, if that makes sense. And then once we get to a couple days later, Venus will ingress into Aquarius and conjoin Pluto on the 17th, again on your 4th house. And so the thing is with Pluto going into your 4th house, I mean, with Mars going in there, this is like problems, but then Venus comes in there and now it's fun. Like Venus is about value and pleasure and connection. And when Venus conjoins Pluto, it's like what you want can get corrupted, or you get what you want through corrupted means. It can also just corrupt, like it's kind of like when you like something, but then like, you know, the people around that thing make it bad for you. That could also be Venus conjoining Pluto. And so the vibe, again, like look at how many things are in your 4th house. There's like a big vibe shift going on with the living situation. Number one, Venus also rules your 12th house of like isolation, alienation, hidden enemies, the subconscious, fears and phobias, as well as your 7th house of like major relationships. So even like your spouse. And that's going into the 4th house and conjoining Pluto, where like part of me just feels like you're not getting the privacy that you want. There might even be some like abandonment of home and family, due to forces out of your control, due to circumstances out of your control. And this also might be like trying to enjoy something, but not being able to. But the more positive side is like, there is some sort of good, fun thing happening here. Again, what I want you guys to do is as you watch this video throughout the year, comment below and let me know what ends up happening. Because I'm really curious how it's going to look for each and every one of you. So that happens. And then, we get to February 22nd, and Venus will conjoin Mars again, still in your 4th house. Now, with everything conjoining Pluto, it's very overwhelming. Pluto makes the small things big and the big things small. So it's kind of like, makes you a little schizo, makes you a little crazy. But that starts to somewhat get alleviated as the days go on. And by the time we get to the 22nd, Venus conjoins Mars, where it's not as extreme. And now it's more of like, pain and pleasure, ambition and energy and fighting and fun. Like it reminds me of like drama. And so your ascendant ruler of you and your 7th ruler of relationships are together in the 4th house. So like maybe you're moving in with your partner, maybe you're moving in with a significant individual, but it's also your 12th ruler of like isolation, alienation, and privacy, as well as your 6th house of like work, health, and coworkers. Like maybe you're moving in with a coworker, maybe you're not getting the privacy that you want, or you're trying to carve that out in your living situation. That's how I look at this. And it's going to be kind of a weird time exploring what that looks like. So then we get to the end of February, and on February 27th and 28th, we're going to have the Mercury and Saturn cazimi. Now, every planet goes cazimi at least once a year. Mercury, we get like 6 to 8 cazimis because of the retrograde cycle. But Saturn, we typically get about 1 cazimi a year. Now, a cazimi is when the sun conjoins a planet or a planet conjoins the sun. And what this essentially is it's like resetting that planet's topics. It's like that planet's birthday for that year, until, of course, it conjoins the sun again. Now, we're going to talk about the Mercury cazimi in just a moment, but I want to talk about the Saturn cazimi. Now, Saturn has moved into Pisces since March of 2023. If you haven't already, check out my Saturn and Pisces video if you want to know more about what Saturn and Pisces is going to mean for you over the next couple of years. But Saturn is about responsibility, duty, obligation, maturity, restrictions, discipline, limitations. And it's moved into your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, drugs, alcohol, children, self-expression. So this part of your life you've been taking a lot more seriously. You've been having to be more disciplined, and you've had to be more mature in. And from March to June of 2023, that was Saturn moving into Pisces and moving direct. Now, I'm going to use this analogy throughout this video, but Saturn moving into a new sign and being direct is like starting a new job and getting on the job training. Someone showing you around, someone showing you what your responsibilities and duties will be. And then from June of 2023 to November of 2023, this is like, all right, you're out on your own now. Now you got to figure it out yourself. You're not getting that on the spot training. And so you're kind of familiar with things, but you're having to figure out, again, what are your limitations? What are your restrictions? Learning to be more responsible of this area. And then from November of 23 up until this point, Saturn has been transiting its shadow. So it's like, all right, I'm more comfortable with what my responsibilities and duties are. I kind of know what I'm doing here. Now, with the Saturn cazimi, we're now moving on to new territory. So this past year has been just about like, all right, like, you learn this, you get introduced to this new thing, you got to learn the ropes with it, and then you get more comfortable with it. Now that Saturn's moving into new territory, it's the same thing, but around the same topics, which again is the 5th house. So creativity, love, romance, sex, pleasure, children, hobbies, self-expression, drugs, and alcohol. And so the Saturn cazimi is like really restarting this whole area for you. The sun does rule your 10th house of career, but this seems like a big reset regarding love, romance, sex, pleasure. Where do you need to be more disciplined? What are your responsibilities? Where do you need to be more restrictive or maybe more mature? Now, Saturn also rules your 3rd house of like short distance travel, neighbors, siblings, your local community. It also rules your 4th house, though, of home and family. So these two topics are intertwined with this, and there's some sort of new shift happening here. Now, at the same time, we have the Mercury cazimi. Mercury rules your 8th house of other people's money, shared resources, debt, death, and inheritance. And Mercury also rules your 11th house of friends and community, like more broadly speaking. Now, Mercury is in detriment in Pisces, which means Mercury doesn't do all that well. But a Mercury cazimi is like getting a message or receiving a message or a line of communication where it's like, I have this new idea or a message is delivered to you. But when Mercury's in detriment, it's like, all right, you get this message, you get this communication, but something about it doesn't make sense. So it's like, if the thing is too, is like, if the 11th house is your friends, the 5th house is like what activity brings you guys together. Maybe it's hobbies, maybe it's just out drinking and partying, that sort of thing. And your 11th house ruler is in detriment in the 5th house, where it's like, again, the people that you're around, you don't enjoy the same things essentially as them, or you're not as into it anymore. And so there seems to be a big restart with, like, again, creativity, even love, romance, sex, pleasure. But the Saturn stuff is being more responsible, moving on to new territory, growing up a little bit in this whole, but being more mature around your kids, being more responsible with children, love and romance and all that kind of good stuff. So this is quite a big shift in this 5th house area for you. And so that leads us to March. March, like January and February, are just kind of like hustle, grind, same shit, different day. A lot of it's for you living situation stuff. But then March is where things get weird. And first off, we start with Mars squaring Uranus on March 9th. Mars is in your 4th house of home and family, and Uranus is in your 7th house of relationships. Now, since 2018, Uranus has been in your 7th house of relationships. Uranus is about innovation, liberation, freedom, instability, ups and downs, extreme erratic behavior. And so there's been a lot of like kind of chaos going on with your 7th house of relationships. And a part of that's going to continue this year, but this is kind of like the highlight, like probably like the best transit this year. But when we get to the 9th, Mars is going to make a square to Uranus. You are ruled by Mars, and it is in your 4th house of home and family, and it's going to square Uranus in your 7th house. This would be like a conflict with a parent, or like if you live with your spouse or your significant other, this is some sort of a blow up related to the living situation. Or if you guys just moved in together, this is going to cause some tension and some chaos. That's what this is looking like here. Or maybe it's even just like a roommate or something like that. But then we get to March 11th, and this is when Venus ingresses into Pisces. This is a big deal because Venus is going to conjoin Saturn at some point when Venus ingresses into Pisces. Venus is about love, connection, indulgences, fun, partying, bringing things together, and she's exalted in Pisces. So she does really, really well here. Like, Venus is a lot of fun. Plus, Venus loves being in the 5th house of creativity, love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, and children. So this will really bring a lot of liveliness to this whole area where you're needing to be disciplined. And so what I wanted to really talk about is, like, while you're being more mature and serious in this area and where you're dealing with more limitations and boundaries, Venus at least like alleviates that a little bit to where it's not just so like, oh, like Saturn in the 5th house is like, you are not having fun. Venus is like, okay, you can have fun, but it's got to be through this very mature and disciplined way. And you've got to kind of, look at, what is fun for you and creative for you in a, more mature and serious way, but you can still have fun doing it. So I really like Venus and Pisces for you guys. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, especially with relationships. A lot of relationship stuff too. And if you're a woman, there is a good chance of pregnancy this year. So watch out. Or, maybe it's a welcome thing. But that's definitely something that could be cooked up on the menu for you guys this year. And that could also start with Venus and Pisces. So then we get to March 18th, and this is when Mercury enters shadow. This kind of begins all of the craziness that is April. April is the craziest month this year. And Mercury is going to enter shadow where it will retrograde, and it's in your 6th house of work, health, routines, pets, day-to-day activities, habits, coworkers, and employees. So as Mercury goes into shadow, pay attention on the 18th because something about this will come back up once we get to the middle of April. And then, of course, we're all done with this by May. But Mercury retrogrades are miscommunications, they're delays, they're slowing downs, they're rethinking, they're reviewing, they're revisiting. And this is all in your 6th house of work. So there might be some delays in your work or schedule. There might be a reschedule. There's some delays in rethinking of your health, maybe even some issues with pets, changing up your routine. There's a lot that's going on here, but this Mercury entering shadow period really starts all the changes because there's a ton of shit happening in April about all this. So then we get to the 25th, and this is the lunar eclipse in Libra. This is the beginning of eclipse season. Eclipse season is the most, extreme 2 weeks out of every 6 months. And this lunar eclipse is happening in your 12th house of isolation, alienation, repressed, unacknowledged parts of yourself, the subconscious, and hidden enemies. And so the South Node has been in your 12th house since last summer. And the easiest way to explain that is like the South Node is again like, or I mean, my bad. The 12th house is like self-sabotage, isolation, alienation. And the South Node going through there is like you're kind of just over your bullshit, and the North Node is bringing more an extreme focus to like what are your habits, what are your routines, what you need to be outside more, you need to be more active in order to clean up and clear out like your subconscious negative beliefs. And this eclipse that's happening in your 12th house is kind of you looking at your 12th house and being like, how do I get in my own way? Venus is your 12th ruler and it's in the 5th house. So there might even be like hidden pleasures or desires that you want to bring up, but maybe you're too scared to bring them up. Or maybe you realize you don't actually like something. This eclipse in your 12th house will be a good time to maybe isolate and hide away, take like a little break from the world. But it will be a little bit lost in your head, and just being over your own bullshit really is the way that I've been talking about it. But then we get to April, and this is when everything gets super crazy. Okay. Like March is weird, and then April is like a whole Pandora's box of events. Number one is we have Mercury stationing retrograde on April 1st. Again, this is in your 6th house of work, health, pets, routines. So this is where we're doing the rethinking, the reviewing, the delays, the changes with work. And again, in astrology, the 10th house is your career, like the title that you wear, but the 6th house is like the labor that goes into it. Like, okay, you could say you're a lawyer, but no one really knows what it looks like to be a lawyer on the day-to-day. That's what the 6th house is that day-to-day. And so Mercury retrograding in here is like changing your schedule, changing your routine, having a slowdown in work, having a slowdown in health, that sort of thing. And as Mercury begins to retrograde, again, we're in the middle of eclipse season, we get to the next thing, which is the solar eclipse in Aries on April 8th. This is our first eclipse in Aries, and this is a really, really big deal. Again, it's still in your 6th house of work, health, pets, routines. And this is like eclipses are major beginnings and major endings. I believe solar eclipses are a bigger deal than lunar eclipses, in my opinion. And this is a really big reset. It's like a major ending or a major beginning related to work, health, pets, routines, labor, jobs, coworkers, employees, that sort of thing. And so we have a Mercury retrograde here, an eclipse here, but then that brings us to the next big part of this, which is 2 days later, Mars is going to conjoin Saturn. Now, why this is a big deal is this eclipse is ruled by Mars. It's in Aries. So wherever Mars is at is going to kind of dictate it. And Mars will conjoin Saturn. Mars-Saturn conjunctions are pretty big deals. And Mars is in your 5th house of creativity, love, romance, sex, drugs, alcohol, children, hobbies, recreation, self-expression. And so as Mars conjoins Saturn here, this is a real serious attitude shift related to love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation. Now, the easiest way to understand a Mars-Saturn conjunction is the best example that we got was the week that lockdowns started back in March of 2020, the beginning of April of 2020, was a Mars-Saturn conjunction. Now, that was like right when Saturn moved into Aquarius and Mars moved into Aquarius and they conjoined each other. Saturn's like governments and authorities. Mars is like separation and cutting, and Aquarius is like society. It was like, separate yourself from society. The government says so. Stay at home. Now, that Mars-Saturn conjunction happened in your 4th house of home and family and living situation. So this is, again, like being locked down at home, or maybe like once that happened, you're like, I need to get out of here. I need to run away from my living situation. That same kind of vibe where it's definitely not like another lockdown, but it's happening in your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, recreation, creativity, like the sense of like, I'm being locked down here. This is where I need to like either separate myself from, or I have to take very, very serious because there's a lot of problems coming from here. And this is all compounded on an eclipse in your 6th house. So part of me wonders if like you have some illness from partying, or some, illnesses related to, again, pleasure, anything like that. Maybe you just need to take a break from having all the fun that you guys like to have. That's what I'm really looking at here. Taking your creative and your, love and romantic life very seriously, because there's a lot of issues here. While at the same time really focusing and prioritizing your health, your routines, and day-to-day habits. Now, this is the weird thing. This is where it gets weird. 10 days later, on April 20th, we have Jupiter conjoining Uranus, which, like I said before, this is like the best transit this year. And this is in your 7th house of relationships, partners, your spouse, and just individuals, like any major individual in your life. Now, why this is weird is, again, this happens like 10 days later, but Jupiter rules your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure. And it's conjoining Uranus. Like Jupiter, for one, Jupiter like rules semen. This is why I've like, if Jupiter transits your 5th house, like that's definitely like a sign for pregnancy. But your 5th ruler of love, romance, sex, pleasure has been in your 7th house of relationships since May of 2023. So there's been this big look at relationships. Like, what do I want in a relationship? What do I like in a relationship? What do I value? And really trying to sink into that as well as you can. Jupiter is all about abundance and growth and expansion. So maybe there's been an expansion of relationships. It's also your 2nd house ruler of money. So a lot more money's been involved in relationships. But it's conjoining Uranus, where Uranus is about liberation, freedom, independence, instability. And a lot of this Jupiter-Uranus thing is like striking gold. It's like all of a sudden this major event happens, or striking oil and the oil goes everywhere. And it's probably good, but it's a little bit messy. And so why I think this is weird is like this Mars-Saturn conjunction happens where it's like a big, heavy, serious energy related to love, romance, sex, pleasure. And then the planet of love, romance, sex, pleasure conjoins Uranus in your 7th house, where it's like, maybe you leave one person, you all of a sudden get dating someone else 5 seconds later, or, maybe you get pregnant, or, that sort of a thing. There's some sort of major shift happening in the relationship area for you at this time. That continues into May, but we have one more thing to talk about. And that's when Mars ingresses into Aries on April 30th. I like this. I think you guys will like this. Mars is in domicile in Aries, and Mars being your ruling planet likes to be in domicile. You'll feel better, and there'll be a lot more ambition and energy towards work, health, pets, routines. Think about May and June of 2022. That was the last time we had Mars in Aries. So if you were really active, really busy with work, on top of your health, that was the last time Mars was in Aries, and you can kind of connect that dot to what it's going to be like by the time we get to late April, early May of 2024. So before I go into this list of stuff, I want to show you why I think May is the best month of the year. As we start May and we get Mars moving into Aries, I want you to look at everything going on in your 7th house. Excuse me. So Venus is in your 7th house. Venus rules your 7th house. She's in domicile. Jupiter is in your 7th house. The sun is there. Uranus is there. There's a really big focus on relationships, and it's all good planets. Like Venus and Jupiter are literally the 2 benefic planets. The sun is arguably benefic, and Uranus can be good or bad depending on the context, but this is a context where it's like it's good. So there's like a lot of really good growth, like comfortable, like good things happening in the relationship world for you at this point. This is why April is so weird, because then we get to May and it's like all relationships for you guys. So by the time we get to May 13th, Mercury leaves shadow. We are all done working on this whole, change in your work and your health and problems with pets, or changing up your routine and schedule. And that started March 18th and that ends May 13th. I shouldn't say it ends, but more so of the change and the mindset shift and the delays and going backwards, that all ends at this point. You're moving into new territory. But then Mars conjoins the North Node on May 19th. Now, this is just turning up the dial to 11. Again, still 6th house, so still the same topics. But this is like, if you're working, you're super duper busy. If you are like healthy and on top of your like, fitness and stuff like that, like you are really grinding it. Like I'd almost say like watch out for injuries, because just Mars conjoining the North Node just is like crack level energy. Like you're doing this, you're doing that. Probably some problems with pets, but you're very, very active. You're very, very, very energized. And I think you're just going to be feeling good. But I mean, look at all the 7th house stuff. You got all this also great relationship stuff happening at the same time. Okay? So really interesting. Then by the end of May, we have Jupiter going into Gemini. That's on May 25th. Now, this is where it gets weird. Gosh, excuse me. Jupiter's going into your 8th house of other people's money, death, debt, and inheritance. Now, Jupiter is a benefic. Jupiter expands, so there will be some sort of expansion related to other people's money, shared resources, debt, death, and inheritance. However, Jupiter's in detriment in Gemini. Like Jupiter doesn't do all that well there. Like it's like doing this and doing that. And Jupiter likes to just do one thing. Jupiter and Gemini is trying to balance 2 things. And throughout this year, you're going to realize it doesn't work, but that takes time. For the meantime, though, on May 25th, it's just kind of like, hey, there's an opportunity that's happening here. Now, the main issue with it is Jupiter rules your 2nd house of money, of your money, but it's in your 8th house of other people's money and it's in detriment. So there's two ways this can look. One way would be like you are at detriment to other people's money for your own funding. Like, you are reliant on other people for your own finances, for your own money. Or if you are in a relationship, like you are the breadwinner and you can't save any money because you have to spend it on your partner or your spouse or whatever. That's the second ruler in detriment in the eighth. Now, Jupiter in the eighth is an expanding of other people's resources. So there might be more access to get them, but it's definitely not yours, if that makes sense. The other thing is Jupiter rules your fifth house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, and children. And that's in the eighth house and it's in detriment. So there's something about like pleasure and fun, and it's in this eighth house of like other people's business and stuff. And it's like, there's this and there's that where it's like, this is a hard one to read. Like if we were doing a consultation, I'd be able to like be a lot more descriptive of like what this is going to look like, but this is going to look slightly different for everybody. But this is just the context, like creativity, love, romance, sex, pleasure involved with other people's money and possessions and belongings, as well as shared resources, and even death and inheritance. So that's what's really interesting to me. And we'll talk more about that here in just as we go along. What I want you guys to do though, is I want you to think about June of 2012, May, June, July of 2012, because that was the last time Jupiter moved into Gemini. And you can think about May, June, July of 2012. Think about that. And that will give you somewhat of an idea of what Jupiter and Gemini will represent for you guys. But as we move to June, the first thing that we have going on is the Venus Cazimi in Gemini on June 4th. And again, this is still in your eighth house of other people's money, death, debt, inheritance, and all that stuff. Now, just like Venus goes retrograde in the same exact sign every 8 years, Venus goes Cazimi in the exact same sign every 8 years. So I want you to think about June of 2016 and what was going on for you related to not only relationships, but other people's money, other people's resources, maybe blending yourself together with other people's resources. Now, Venus, because again, Venus rules your seventh house of relationships and it's going Cazimi. So it's having this restart regarding relationships and other people's resources, but it's also your 12th ruler of like self-sabotage, repressed, unacknowledged parts of yourself, the subconscious, hidden enemies, that going Cazimi in the eighth house, where part of me like this almost reminds me of like a debt trap. It's probably not the most positive spin or the best way to look at it, but like 12th ruler, going Cazimi in the eighth is kind of like, okay, well, what does that look like? Does someone steal something from you and you don't even know it? Again, the 12th and the 8th house are like very private houses. So it's going to be definitely affecting a very private area of your life, not so public. And I mean, you may not even see it. The 12th house and the 8th house are both hidden houses. So you may not even see it. Where I see it more so is about relationships though. But what's interesting is we have this Venus Cazimi in your 8th, Mercury enters your 8th, and then Mercury conjoins Jupiter in your 8th. Where all like, there's just a lot of action and energy going on with other people's resources, shared resources, possibly death, I just don't know how I feel about death here. Like if you've gotten a consultation from me, like I've brought up death before, if I see something like that and it's like, well, depending on your chart, this might bring that up, but like I would want to see your chart to see exactly what it would be. But there's just a lot of action and energy going on in the 8th house. So that brings us to June 8th. This is when Mars goes into Taurus. And again, Mars is going to enter your 7th house of relationships, partner, spouse, individual. Mars is your ruling planet and it's entering its sign of detriment. Mars does not like to be in Taurus. Taurus is very slow and Mars wants to go fast. Mars is very stubborn in Taurus. And so your ascendant ruler is in detriment in the 7th house, where it's like you are reliant on your partner for support. Maybe there are more fights and conflicts within the relationship. Maybe your partner's going through it and you have to be the caretaker at the moment or be the more supportive role, and it might be frustrating. If you're in a committed relationship and you're married and everything's fine, well, your partner's going to be aggravated and, annoyed and not moving all that fast. You can think about July and August of 2022. That was the last time Mars was in Taurus. And what was going on during that time for you? Because again, that was the last time Mars was in Taurus. This will be a very similar time regarding relationships as July and August of 2022. Then on June 14th, we get the Mercury Cazimi. Again, this is resetting your whole 8th house of other people's money, debt, death, and inheritance, where it just seems like, again, like bigger credit card loan or some sort of just major shift happening here. I mean, Mercury also rules your 11th house of friends, and it's going Kazemi in the 8th. This one's just a hard one to read. Like, it's really going to be specific to your guys' situation, but it is like a lot of energy and change and new beginnings happening with other people's resources, death, debt, and inheritance. So again, comment below as you watch this throughout the year. Let me know what's going to happen. Then by the time we get to June 30th, Saturn stations retrograde. Again, this is still in your 5th house of creativity, love, romance, sex, children, hobbies, self-expression. So as Saturn has been direct since that end of February time, you've been taking on you've been learning what your new responsibilities are, where you need to grow up and be more mature. And the way I've been trying to analogize this is Saturn in moving direct is like doing classroom work, and then Saturn going retrograde is applying that work in the field. So it's easy to understand something when you are just learning it in the classroom. But the second you bring it out to the real world is where you get a little bit of a confusion, and you have to really like discipline yourself and learn, what works and what doesn't. And so Saturn retrograde is like, okay, now I know, like I said before, it's like getting on the job training, and then Saturn retrograde is like, you're on your own now. You have to figure some stuff out for yourself. So Saturn retrograde is also going to be a big slowdown in the love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, children area. This is going to be about like, all right, you have to be more mature. And this is kind of that growth edge, a lot more of that pressure, a lot more of enforcing those boundaries and limitations and things like that. So that's what's going on here. So that brings us to July. And the first, like January through June is like when all the action happens. And then by the time we get to July, August, September, and even October, things really kind of slow down a little bit. So when we get to July, Mars is first going to conjoin Uranus. This is happening on July 15th. This is a major disruption, okay? We had a big Mars-Uranus conjunction in 2022. I want you to think about what was going on in relationships for you August 1st of 2022. Again, this is all in your 7th house of relationships, partner, spouse, individual. You guys know the deal by now. And the thing is with this is Mars is in detriment, so it's like extra crabby and extra annoyed and slow and irritated and stubborn. And it's your ascendant ruler in detriment in the 7th, and it's conjoining Uranus, where there just seems to be a big blow up, like a big, like, for example, you're already irritated and stubborn, and then all of a sudden Mars conjoins Uranus where something really irritates you and it's very stubborn. And Mars conjoining Uranus, like pretty much the Mars-Uranus conjunction last time was when they blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is so fucking on point for the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So there's some sort of unstable thing that happens, like an explosive, erratic change within you and the relationship at this point, okay? So be aware for that. Then on July 16th, the next day, Mercury ingresses into shadow. Mercury is going to be in shadow in your 10th house of career, reputation, legacy. But as we move forward into August, Mercury is actually going to retrograde in Virgo, which rules your 11th house of friends and community. And there will be a miscommunication or a delay or a rethinking or a reviewing of friendships, but this starts from an area of career and reputation and legacy. So we'll talk more about that. So Mercury goes into shadow in your 10th house. There's going to be some changes related to friends and career starting at this point. So just kind of pay attention to this day. This is just a second Mercury retrograde. I think this Mercury retrograde is not that big of a deal, to be honest with you guys, though. But then we get to July 20th. This is when Mars ingresses into Gemini. Mars is going to enter your 8th house, like we've talked about, other people's money, death, debt, inheritance, things like that. Now, why this one is a big deal? It's a big deal for a few reasons, but I want to just give you guys something to think about. The last time Mars was in Gemini was between September of 2022 and March of 2023. But we had a Mars retrograde in Gemini that whole time. So that was really frustrating and bad. Not all that fun. Mars will just simply transit through Gemini. But I want you to think about what was going on from September, October of 2022 until about March of 2023 related to other people's resources, shared resources. The 8th house is also like secrets and fears too. Like I feel like when your ascendant ruler is in the 8th, like it's just high anxiety, frustration, like, paranoia almost, especially for the Scorpio risings. But as Mars goes through the 8th house, there's again more of inflammation and fights related to other people's resources. It's also your 6th ruler of work, health, routine, pets in your 8th house, again, of death, other people's resources, things like that. Now that just starts on July 20th, but that will be a big deal for when we get to August. So once we go into August, the first thing that we have is Mercury stationing retrograde, like I said, on August 5th in your 11th house of friends, networks, and community. So again, a slowdown, a miscommunication, a delay related to friends and work stuff, that happens. But then on August 14th is when we're going to have that Mars-Jupiter conjunction. And this is definitely like a blow up. Again, still in the 8th house. Now, for most of the zodiac signs, I've been able to like make this make a little bit more sense. But because it's the 8th house, it's like it's going to be so different for each one of you. Now, Mars conjoining, like, well, let me put it this way. Jupiter in Gemini is trying to do two things at once. Jupiter is like, oh, there's this opportunity and there's this opportunity. But over the course of this year, you're going to realize that like it's just not that simple. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And Mars conjoining Jupiter is kind of like when you realize, oh, like I've taken on too much, especially related to money and related to, again, love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation. Like in other people's resources or other people's like relying on other people's resources. Jupiter in Gemini is about taking the opportunities that you have there. There's clearly a lot of opportunities that happen in June that happen here. But it's like by this point, something blows up here. Like your ascendant ruler is conjoining your second ruler in the 8th, where it's like, you really got to go into debt or you really got to spend some major money. And it's like your 6th ruler and your 5th ruler where, again, maybe problems with I relate to 6th ruler and 5th ruler in the 8th. That's just reminds me of like sleeping with coworker kind of energy, or, something along those lines, getting too drunk at a office party or some shit like that. But this is where things like get out of control and you realize like you're trying to juggle all this stuff and you just can't. But that is why what's funny about that is 5 days later, we get to the 19th of August, and that's that Jupiter-Saturn square. And this is kind of, again, that big meta transit. And it's your 8th house and 5th house. And now here's the deal. While your 5th ruler's in the 8th and Saturn's in your 5th, you're really changing your relationship to, again, love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, drugs, alcohol, and children. And here's the thing. Jupiter in Gemini is like, I'm trying to do these two things. And then Mars conjoining Jupiter, it's like, well, that blows up. And then Jupiter and Saturn square, where now that Saturn's retrograde and you're doing all this hard work on having to be more disciplined and more responsible for this 5th house stuff, you start going, oh, I don't think I can do both of these things. And I've got to readjust my situation in order to manage this better. Again, it's like Saturn's in your 5th house. You need to be more responsible, but your 5th ruler is in detriment, squaring it, where it's like, you're just going to try to have your cake and eat it too. And you realize here, as much as you might want to, as much as you're going to try to force it, it's not going to work. And so as Saturn squares Jupiter is when that that mental connection kind of clicks and you go, okay, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to have to make some changes. And those changes really start to come around in December of this year. So you don't need to make that major of changes as of right now, but that will come up by the end of the year. What's going on? Oh, there we go. Then we get to September. September's boring. Pluto moves back into Capricorn. To be honest with you, same shit, different day. It's been there for 16 years. It's kind of nice, kind of familiar. But this will be the last time Pluto's in Capricorn. Enjoy it. It's in your 3rd house, so siblings, neighbors, short distance travel, that sort of thing. But then Venus conjoins the South Node on the 3rd. Now, we had a Venus South Node conjunction at the end of November of 2023. So I want you to think about that as all of this is happening. Like what was going on for you around the end of November around these topics? 12th house of isolation, the subconscious, hidden enemies, just hiding away from the world and like recuperating. Because when we pull up the chart, where are we at here? Let's do this. Venus conjoining the South Node is full moon. It's your 7th ruler of relationships in the 12th house. This could be like undermining relationships, secret relationships, repressed, unacknowledged parts of like what you do want. And Venus conjoining the South Node is like, this is nice, but I don't want this anymore. Venus in Libra is like, oh, I like these things, but they don't bring me joy anymore. And it's Venus in your 12th house where it's like, I would try not to undermine relationships. Like this is also like your 12th ruler returning where it's like, don't do any self-sabotage stuff, but there is going to be a part of like relationships and like your own subconscious where you're just kind of sick of stuff. You're kind of drained and exhausted by it, especially when it comes to pleasure, relationships. But my question would be like, are you undermining yourself and are you self-sabotaging, or like, do you just need to take time to rest and recuperate by yourself in order to get your mind clear? That's going to be important here. And then the next day, Mars enters Cancer on the 4th of September. Now, Mars is going to enter your 9th house, so spirituality, religion, higher education like colleges, far distance travel, publishing, broadcasting, social media. And as Mars enters that ninth house area, Mars is going to be fallen. Mars does not like to be in Cancer. Mars wants to be in Scorpio and Aries. Mars is Cancer is its fallen sign. So Mars is about like fighting and combativeness, and Cancer is about like babies and protection. So there's like this like when Mars is in Cancer, you're very crabby, you're very defensive, you're very insecure. I would think about April of 2023. That was the last time we had Mars in Cancer. And maybe with your ascendant ruler fallen in the ninth is like, you need to do some more spiritual work, like to heal yourself and to like relax yourself a little bit. Like, but also Mars in the ninth house is kind of shaking your fist at God, being frustrated with, your worldview and, problems with far distance traveling, feeling crabby, problems with higher education and social media. It's also your sixth ruler of work, health, and routine, fallen in the ninth house. So it's like lacking that confidence, lacking that belief or that faith in it. And that will be a big deal as we move on, because that's just the Mars ingress, and that's where that begins. Now we get to October, and we start eclipse season again. On October 12th, we get a solar eclipse in Libra. Now, as we have the solar eclipse in Libra, it is going to be, again, in your 12th house of isolation, subconscious hidden enemies. I want you to think about what was going on October 12th, 13th, 14th of 2023. Because that was the last time we had a solar eclipse in Libra in your 12th house, where again, this is really just kind of getting over your own bullshit and really letting go of bad habits, things that, are that are about self-sabotage, repressed, unacknowledged parts of yourself. And your 12th ruler, Venus, is in detriment in your first, where it's just like, you're just going to feel like shit. It's like, dude, you got to get rid of some shit. Like, stop fucking doing the same thing and expecting different results. That's kind of my thing for you guys here. Then after that, on the 4th is when, on October 4th, Mars enters shadow. And again, it's in your ninth house of spirituality, religion, higher education, far distance travel. Again, social media, publishing, broadcasting. Mars will come back to this degree in March of 2025. Mars is going to go into Leo of your 10th house of career, station retrograde, and go back into your ninth. So part of me wonders if, like, do you need to go back to school and get educated for a job that you want? Is there traveling issues with the job that you want? Do you have like a lack of confidence or a lack of clarity about what it is that you want to do? Like your ninth ruler fallen, or your ascendant ruler fallen in the ninth, about to go retrograde here, is like, maybe you don't have the credentials to do what it is that you want to do. It's a little complicated, but Mars will come back here by March of 2025. So pay attention to what happens here related to spirituality, your religion, far distance travel, publishing, broadcasting, social media, your belief, related to you and your body and your health and your habits and your work. Pay attention to this October 4th, October 5th day, because you will come back to this by March of 25. And again, March of 2025 is so many different crazy events happening. And I talk more about that in my 2024 overview. But 2024 is simply a buildup to 2025. So then by October 9th, Jupiter stations retrograde in your 8th house, other people's money, death, debt, inheritance, all the stuff we've talked about. And the way I like to talk about this is like, okay, it's easy to have faith and be grateful and excited when things are going your way. What happens when they're not going your way? Jupiter going retrograde is now re-examining your beliefs about death and other people's money and debt and inheritance, and maybe seeing some of the problems that you've gotten yourself into, especially related to money, especially related to love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, and being like, I don't know if this works. Again, it's very similar to the analogy I use for Saturn retrograde, where, Jupiter being direct is like doing the classwork. It's super easy when it's in a classroom, but then when you have to do it in the field in real life, there tends to be some complications. So Jupiter retrograding in the 8th is like the good luck kind of goes away. You have to like take what you have already and work with it in and of itself regarding money, other people's money, and the love, romance, sex stuff. And we're going to talk about that second part here in just another second. So then we get to October 17th. So this actually isn't a lunar eclipse. I kind of messed up here. Technically, we have an eclipse going on in Virgo and Pisces. I'm not that worried about it yet, though, because we have so much of Virgo Pisces eclipses happening in 2025 that I think are way, way, way more important. And we'll talk about that when I do these next year. But this eclipse slash full moon is happening in your 6th house of work, health, pets, routines. Again, the stuff that we've consistently been talking about. And what I think is interesting about this is this like full moon is happening in your 6th house of work, health, routines. The ruler of your body is fallen. It's Mars in Cancer. Mars is ruled by the moon. Moon is in Aries. It's ruled by Mars. And there's kind of, and like the sun's also in your 12th house. So there's kind of this big look at like, what are you doing? You need to get your shit together. Why are you so low energy? Do you not have that spiritual gratification? Like, I feel like you guys are very spiritually drained here, and you're going to need something else to like pump you up. I just feel like this is probably a low point for you guys during this year. That brings us to November. By November, Mars moves into Leo on November 3rd. It's going into your 10th house of career, reputation, and legacy. Now, there's a good part of this for about 5 minutes, and then once we get to December, that changes. So let me go to this real quick. Let's go back a couple hours, and then November 3rd. Okay, so Mars in Leo is like acting confident, acting proud, saying shit with your chest, being just overall confident. Like Mars in Leo is like roaring. So your ascendant ruler is now out of its sign of fall, and it's in your 10th house, where it's about career, reputation, legacy. Now, the last time we had Mars in Leo was between like the end of May of 2023 and June of 2023. So think about what was going on with career stuff then. That was a little bit different, but kind of similar vibe. There might be more fights and conflicts related to career, but there is also just going to be a lot more energy related to career and your title. Again, this isn't so much about the work and labor, but more so like the title that you wear. But Mars also rules your 6th house of labor, of routines, of health, and that's going into your 10th house. And so there is a big focus on the work that you do and the title that you wear for it. And that's about to go into a change. Mars is in shadow here. We are going to have quite a bit of a change here. So we'll talk about that. But at least Mars being in Leo, you guys aren't going to feel as bad as of right now for about a month. So then Mercury is going to enter shadow on November 7th of your 2nd house of money and possessions. Mercury is going to be in Sagittarius. Mercury is in detriment in Sagittarius. So there is going to be, and the big thing here is, I just want to show you, Mercury rules your 8th house of other people's money, and it's going to be in detriment in your 2nd house of your money. But Jupiter rules over your money, and it's in detriment in your 8th house of other people's money. And this whole, so Mercury is going to enter shadow here on the 7th. It will go forward, and it's going to go opposite Jupiter, and it's going to retrograde opposite Jupiter. And this whole November time is like really just getting this money situation figured out. Like it's really like shit's over here, shit's over there, everything's crisscrossed. But this November time is really getting this whole money, debt, shared resources thing figured out. And it's going to be a little complicated, but it's funny. Like this is a funny Mercury retrograde to me. Yes, it will be quote unquote bad, but like in a funny way. That's just my opinion. November 19th, Pluto moves back into Aquarius, where it will stay for the next 2 decades. Lots of transformation and power and things going on with home and family and living situation. From November of 2024 till July of 2025, every single major planet is going to move into a new zodiac sign. So Pluto moves into Aquarius. Neptune moves into Aries. Uranus moves into Gemini. Saturn moves into Aries. And Jupiter moves into Cancer. So this is the beginning of all of these major changes that are going to be happening from here until like the middle of summer of 2025. Then by November 15th, I know these two, I said the 19th already, but just bear with me, I messed up here. Saturn stations direct, again, in the 5th house of creativity, love, children, hobbies, that sort of stuff. It's at this point where you're more comfortable with the boundaries, the restrictions, the discipline, the limitations. It's like, okay, I know what is mine to do, and I know where I need to be more responsible and grow up, and I feel more comfortable moving forward with these things. They're not as challenging to me anymore. That's going to be important. So Saturn stations direct, and then Mercury stations retrograde by November 25th, again in the 2nd house of money, possessions. This is you guys figuring out this whole money thing regarding shared resources and love and romance and all of that stuff. I think this is going to be quite a funny Mercury retrograde. But that brings us to December. Mars stations retrograde on the 6th of December. And again, this is in your 10th house of career, reputation, legacy. Now, the thing is with this is, again, Mars was in your 10th house of career, and you felt a lot better than Mars being in what's it called? Fallen in your ninth, but Mars retrograding in Leo is like having your tail tucked between your legs. Like, it reminds me of the Cowardly Lion, where it's like Mars in Leo is kind of like, yeah, I'm just gonna say this and roar, and then it's like all bark, no bite, and then it's kind of like, oh, I actually don't have the confidence to do this. Oh, I don't know if I'm good enough to do this. And it's your sixth ruler of work and labor, and your first ruler of you and yourself, like retrograding in the 10th, where there seems like, again, tail tucked between your legs, or a loss of a job, or a shifting in your career. It seems like a big shift in career, which, by the way, let me give you some hope. All of the problems that you experience in the 10th and the ninth house from the end of 24 and the beginning of 25 get resolved and get much better by summer of 25 through summer of 2026. So it's kind of like you have to go through these problems in order for good things to happen later on. But this definitely seems like a change in work, a slowdown, a not liking what you're doing, a lack of confidence, your tail tucked between your legs regarding work and career. Then Mercury stations direct on the 16th. It's like, all right, this money situation's still goofy, but at least there's no more delays and recommunications or slowdowns. Like, I kind of have an idea of what's going on here. And then by the 24th, Jupiter square Saturn again. And like I said, in August, where August was like, I'm trying to take these opportunities, but, oh, I'm realizing I have a lot more responsibilities than maybe I anticipated. This is like kind of the opposite. This is, okay, Saturn is direct. I am moving forward with, and I'm more comfortable with what is mine to do, where I need to be more responsible, disciplined, where I need to have better boundaries, what my limitations are. Like, you're more comfortable in that because you've already done it. But Jupiter is retrograde, where you're like, hey, I may not be able to seize all of the opportunities or all of these good things to other people's resources as I may want to, because I have to be more disciplined in this area. So that's kind of like what this is like going back to August of 2024 and what you kind of go, oh shit, yeah, like this may be an issue later on. This is when this gets resolved by the very end of the year. And then, of course, we go into 2025. So that's this year, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you think, what month you're looking forward to the most, what you're not looking forward to, what you guys think is going to happen. Again, make sure you go to my website, get that transit calendar if you want to stay up to date when transits are hitting your planets in your birth chart as well. Feel free to book a consult with me if you want to get even more really detailed information. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to keep up to date with all of the transits of 2024. And with that being said, I'll be seeing you guys next time.